They thought Joseph Kowalski was just another frail old man slowing down the range. Officer Blake Matthews sneered at his trembling hands, dismissed him like dead weight. But what he didn't know, Joseph wasn't some retired hobbyist. He was the Ghost of Bastogne, the deadliest Allied sniper of WW2. And when that first shot landed dead center from 800 yards, every phone lit up, every smirk vanished. Stick around, because when history fires back, arrogance doesn't stand a chance. We'd love to know where in the world you're tuning in from and what time it is there. Comment below and subscribe to stay updated. Through the bustling shooting range, Range Officer Blake Matthews strode with the practiced arrogance of unchallenged authority, his polished brass badge catching the fluorescent lights. The trembling hands of the elderly man before him, Joseph Kowalski, scratched an almost illegible signature across the range forms, each shaky stroke fueling Blake Matthews' growing irritation. "Sir?" Blake Matthews drawled, savoring the false courtesy as the range's safety buzzer pierced the air. "Perhaps the simulator would be more appropriate for someone of your condition." His fingers traced the badge unconsciously, drawing strength from its familiar weight. The old man's quiet dignity grated against his nerves like sandpaper. A cell phone camera whirred to life nearby. Some rookie shooter always seemed to be recording these days. Blake Matthews paid it no mind. The range was his domain, his kingdom of brass and gunpowder. He'd dealt with every type of wannabe marksman, and this frail specimen wouldn't be any different. "I requested the longest lane," Joseph Kowalski repeated softly, his calm voice carrying an edge that sent an unexpected shiver down Blake Matthews' spine. But Blake Matthews squared his shoulders, blocking the old man's path. The badge gleamed brighter, reflecting his sneer. "Listen here," Blake Matthews growled, stepping closer, invading the elderly man's space. "I don't have time for games. This is a serious facility, not a retirement home shooting gallery. Why don't you—" "Officer Matthews!" A sharp voice cut through the tension. Sarah Chen, his assistant rangemaster, appeared at his elbow, her eyes wide with recognition as she stared at their elderly visitor. "Sir, this is Joseph Kowalski. He's the Ghost of Bastogne." The words hit Blake Matthews like physical blows. The Ghost of Bastogne. His most lethal Allied sniper. Over 300 confirmed kills. 8 Nazi officers in a single night. The legend they still taught about in advanced marksmanship courses. Blake Matthews' hand fell from his badge as though it burned. Dozens of phones were recording now. The hashtag Range Officer Fail already forming in his mind. His kingdom suddenly felt like a house of cards in a hurricane. "Perhaps," Joseph Kowalski said quietly, those steady eyes boring into Blake Matthews' soul, "you'd care to demonstrate proper technique for me?" A small smile played at the corners of his mouth. "Since you're so concerned about my condition." Will Blake Matthews' authority survive this confrontation with a living legend? Has his power finally met its match in the humble strength of an elderly hero? The range's buzzer sounded again, but Blake Matthews barely heard it. His fingers found the badge once more, clutching it like a drowning man grasps driftwood. In all his years running this range, he'd never felt so small, so exposed. Every pair of eyes burned into him, every camera lens captured his humiliation. Running his thumb over the badge's surface, Blake Matthews remembered his first day as range officer, how his instructor had warned him about the dangers of pride. "Power isn't in the badge," the old man had said. "It's in the respect you earn." Now, facing Joseph Kowalski's quiet dignity, those words echoed like shots in an empty range. Type respect in the comments if you've ever misjudged someone based on appearances. The air grew thick with tension as Blake Matthews faced a choice that would define his career. In the next 10 minutes, he would either swallow his pride or watch his authority crumble like spent brass beneath the boots of a legend. Officer Blake Matthews stared at his reflection in the range's glass partition, adjusting his range officer badge with practiced precision. The fluorescent lights caught its polished surface, throwing sharp gleams across the walls. 20 years of maintaining order at Liberty Peak shooting range had taught him to spot trouble, and this elderly man with his ancient rifle case was definitely trouble. These new shooters with their space-age suppressors and tactical gear, they know what modern shooting is about, Blake Matthews thought, watching another group of regulars executing perfect drills. His kingdom of brass and gunpowder ran like clockwork, every shooter following his exacting standards. Until today. The old man's trembling hands seemed to mock everything Blake Matthews had built. Those outdated movements, that worn leather case that belonged in a museum, it all scratched against his carefully maintained order like sandpaper on glass. Through the range's observation window, he could see other shooters stealing glances, their whispers carrying despite the muffled reports of suppressed fire. A memory surfaced, unbidden. 25 years ago, his instructor at the police academy had praised his potential. "Matthews, you've got the eye of an eagle and the patience of a saint." That praise had shaped him, driven him to enforce perfection. But now, watching this elderly man's deliberate movements, something felt off. Wrong. Blake Matthews' fingers found their way to his badge again, tracing its edges. Reports had been surfacing lately, complaints about his excessive strictness with certain shooters. The range owner had pulled him aside last week, mentioning something about inclusive policies and respecting experience. He'd dismissed it then. Now those words echoed strangely. The old man's rifle case opened with a soft click that somehow carried across the range. Blake Matthews felt his chest tighten as the worn leather revealed its contents. The M1903 Springfield lay in worn velvet, its wood gleaming with decades of careful maintenance. Despite himself, he leaned closer to the glass. The craftsmanship was undeniable, but it didn't belong here. Not in his modern facility. A quick search on his phone revealed disturbing patterns. Social media threads about old-school discrimination at Liberty Peak. Veterans groups discussing respect for experience and historical expertise. His thumb paused over a particularly damning review. Range Officer Matthews needs to learn that accuracy isn't measured in gadgets. Type wisdom if you've ever misjudged someone's experience. The badge felt heavier now. Blake Matthews watched the old man methodically arrange his shooting space, each movement speaking of thousands of repetitions. Other range officers had started treating elderly shooters differently after that sensitivity training last month, training he'd skipped, claiming seniority. "Sir?" A junior range officer approached, tablet in hand. "There's something you should see." The screen showed an old military record, topped with a faded photograph. Blake Matthews felt the floor shift beneath his feet as he read the name. His kingdom of brass and gunpowder suddenly felt very small indeed. Have you ever faced a moment when everything you thought you knew crumbled? Blake Matthews wondered, his reflection now seeming strange and unfamiliar in the glass. When your certainty shatters like a clay target, leaving only questions. His badge caught the light again, but this time its gleam seemed less like authority and more like a spotlight, exposing every assumption he'd ever made. The hollow pops of modern suppressors continued, but now they seemed shallow against the weight of history contained in that worn leather case. Blake Matthews stood frozen, watching the elderly man prepare for his first shot, understanding with growing clarity that his carefully ordered world was about to change forever. Through the wavering heat lines rising from the range, Blake Matthews watched in stunned silence as the old man's rifle sang its devastating song. Each rapport felt like a personal assault on Blake Matthews' authority, his expertise, his very identity as head range officer. The badge that had always been his shield of superiority now seemed to mock him, pressing against his chest like a brand of shame. The impossible spectacle unfolding before Blake Matthews defied everything he'd built his reputation on. 5 shots, 5 hits, 800 yards. Not just hits, perfect strikes, each one punching through the exact center of targets he'd smugly declared challenging even for professionals. The old man, Kowalski, hadn't even broken a sweat. "Sir, that's not standard range procedure," Blake Matthews heard himself say, his voice carrying none of its usual commanding presence. The words felt hollow, desperate, like a child clinging to rule books when faced with a master. Several younger shooters who'd always hung on his every word now stood transfixed, their phones recording every second of his humiliation. The whispers started soft, but grew like a rising tide. "Did you see that? Who is he? Someone look him up." Blake Matthews felt his world shrinking as screens lit up around him, thumbs flying across keyboards. Old Sniper flashed across a phone near him, then another, and another. His stomach churned as he watched the view counter tick up. 1,000, 5,000, 20,000. A notification pinged. Someone had tagged the range's official account. Blake Matthews' hands trembled as he opened it, finding his earlier interaction with Kowalski already viral. His condescending smirk, his patronizing instructions, his dismissive wave when the old man had quietly mentioned his previous experience. "Sir," a regular client approached, phone extended. "You should see this." The Wikipedia page displayed made Blake Matthews' blood run cold. Joseph Kowalski, Distinguished Service Cross, confirmed kills, classified, known in military circles as the Ghost of Bastogne, the deadliest Allied sniper of World War II. Blake Matthews' fingers found his range officer badge, clutching it like a drowning man grasping driftwood. The cold metal offered no comfort now. "I've spent 15 years building my reputation here," he thought, panic rising. 15 years of being the expert, the authority. And in 5 shots, 5 perfect shots. The range had fallen silent except for the soft clicks of phone cameras. Through the scope of his own shame, Blake Matthews watched as veteran shooters approached Kowalski with reverence, while others pointedly avoided eye contact with their once respected range officer. The old man simply cleaned his rifle with practiced ease, those steady hands moving with the precision of decades. Old Sniper continued its relentless climb. Veteran groups were sharing it. Military channels were picking it up. Range officer schooled by WWII to legend, read one headline. Blake Matthews' phone buzzed with a message from range management. "Meeting. Tomorrow. Early." Have you ever watched your whole world unravel in less time than it takes to fire 5 rounds? Blake Matthews asked himself, his badge now feeling like lead against his chest. Have you ever realized that everything you thought made you special was nothing but a uniform and a title? Share this moment of revelation if you've ever discovered that true mastery speaks louder than authority. Type humbled if you've learned that wisdom doesn't always wear a badge. The sun was setting now, casting long shadows across the range. Blake Matthews stood alone, watching as the day's last shooters packed up their gear. All except Kowalski, who took one final shot, a perfect hit that echoed across the range like judgment itself. The sound would haunt Blake Matthews' dreams for months to come. Officer Blake Matthews stared at his badge lying between them, its polished surface no longer a shield of authority, but a mirror reflecting his shattered pride. The fluorescent lights of the shooting range seemed to dim as Joseph Kowalski's weathered voice filled the space, each word precise as a sniper's round. 317, Kowalski said quietly, and Blake Matthews felt his chest tighten. The number hung in the air like smoke after a shot. Around them, a growing crowd of young shooters held their phones steady, their camera lenses focused on Blake Matthews' crumbling facade. Blake Matthews' fingers trembled as he reached for his badge, then withdrew. The very symbol he'd wielded so arrogantly just hours ago now felt like a burning brand. The whir of phone cameras provided a constant reminder that his humiliation would live forever online. At range officer down was probably already trending. "Tell them what you told me earlier, Officer Matthews," one of the younger shooters prompted, her phone capturing every excruciating moment. Blake Matthews swallowed hard, his throat dry as sandpaper. I told Mr. Kowalski he was too old to handle modern weapons." Blake Matthews forced out the words, each one tasting like bile. "I suggested he stick to telling war stories instead of taking up space on my range." The collective intake of breath from the onlookers made Blake Matthews wince. Kowalski continued his story, describing missions that had become military legend, while Blake Matthews stood rooted in place, watching his own professional reputation dissolve with every word. "Type respect if you believe wisdom deserves recognition," someone in the crowd called out, and Blake Matthews noticed the comments already flooding the live stream. The crack of a single shot rang out. Kowalski had picked up a rifle, and even now, decades after the war, his form was perfect. The bullet hole in the target was dead center, making Blake Matthews' earlier demonstration look amateur by comparison. "You see, Officer Matthews," Kowalski said, his voice carrying the weight of hard-earned wisdom, "marksmanship isn't about authority. It's about respect, for the weapon, for the craft, and for each other." Blake Matthews' carefully constructed world of range protocol violations and strict regulations crumbled around him. His supervisor would see this video. Everyone would see it. He could already picture the disciplinary hearing. I understand now, sir," Blake Matthews managed, his voice barely above a whisper. The "sir" came naturally this time, without a trace of his former condescension. The badge still lay between them, its surface catching the range lights, reminding Blake Matthews of everything he'd gotten wrong. He reached for it slowly, not to reclaim his authority, but to acknowledge its true meaning. "Share this moment if you believe in second chances," another voice called from the crowd, and Blake Matthews realized that his redemption might lie not in defending his actions, but in admitting his mistakes. "Mr. Kowalski," Blake Matthews said, finally finding his voice, "would you consider teaching a class here? Our shooters could learn from your experience." The words felt foreign in his mouth, but right in his heart. The old sniper's eyes met his, and Blake Matthews saw not victory or vindication, but understanding. The cameras captured it all: the nod, the handshake, the moment when authority yielded to wisdom. As the crowd dispersed, Blake Matthews caught glimpses of the video titles already being uploaded. "Range Officer Meets Real Hero." WW2 Sniper School's modern expert. Respect earned the hard way. His shame was now a teaching moment for thousands. Blake Matthews picked up his badge last, its weight different now. He'd wear it with new understanding tomorrow, knowing that true authority comes not from a piece of metal, but from the wisdom to recognize when you're wrong. "The range is yours, Mr. Kowalski," Blake Matthews said, stepping aside. "I look forward to learning from you." The words were being recorded, but for the first time that day, Blake Matthews didn't care about the cameras. He cared about getting it right. Blake Matthews stared at his reflection in the range's glass door, his badge glinting under the fluorescent lights. 24 hours ago, he'd been the unquestioned authority at Freedom Ridge shooting range. Now his hands trembled as he polished the metal shield that had once been his armor. The morning silence shattered as his phone buzzed again. Another notification. Matthews. Lesson was still trending, the video of his confrontation with Joseph Kowalski playing on every social platform. Blake Matthews watched himself again, witnessing his own arrogance crumble as the elderly veteran demonstrated marksmanship that defied belief. "Your form is incorrect," Joseph's calm voice echoed in Blake Matthews' memory. Not mocking, not vengeful, just stating facts with the quiet confidence of a man who had proven himself in ways Blake Matthews could never imagine. The range officer's chest tightened as he remembered his own dismissive sneer, his condescending remarks about outdated techniques. The security cameras had captured every moment, Blake Matthews' initial scoff, the whispers of the other shooters, and then the revelation. A fellow range member's excited shout, "That's Joseph Kowalski, the Ghost of Warsaw! 97 confirmed kills defending Allied forces!" Blake Matthews had felt the ground shift beneath his feet, his certainty evaporating like morning mist. The badge felt heavy in his hands now. Blake Matthews traced its edges, remembering how he'd wielded it like a shield against criticism, using it to silence questions and dismiss experience that didn't match his textbook training. "Type humble if you've ever learned wisdom from an unexpected teacher," he whispered to his reflection, echoing the comments flooding his viral moment. The range door opened, and Joseph entered, straight-backed despite his years. Blake Matthews' throat constricted. This was the moment he'd been dreading and needing in equal measure. The elderly sniper's eyes held no judgment, only patient understanding. "Mr. Kowalski," Blake Matthews began, his voice cracking, "I've spent my entire career thinking I knew everything about marksmanship. But yesterday you showed me what real expertise looks like. Not just in shooting, but in dignity." The morning sun streamed through the windows, catching the badge as Blake Matthews extended it. "I'd like to create a new position here at Freedom Ridge, Master Instructor of Advanced Techniques. Would you consider teaching our elite classes?" Joseph's weathered hands accepted the badge, examined it, and returned it with a nod that carried more weight than any certification Blake Matthews had ever received. "Wisdom isn't about age or rank, son," Joseph said, his first words since yesterday's demonstration. "It's about remaining humble enough to keep learning." The videos had reached millions, but Blake Matthews realized the true viral moment wasn't the shooting demonstration or his public humbling. It was this quiet morning revelation, this understanding that authority means nothing without wisdom to guide it. His badge, now pinned back on his chest, felt different. Not a symbol of power, but a reminder of responsibility. "Share this if you believe in second chances and unexpected teachers," Blake Matthews murmured, watching as Joseph began setting up the range for the day's first class. The morning light caught his instructor's badge, newly minted with Joseph Kowalski, master instructor, gleaming beneath the range's logo. Blake Matthews straightened his uniform, ready to begin his day not as an authority, but as a student. The trending hashtag would fade, but the lesson would remain. True expertise wears no badge, needs no validation, and teaches through example rather than force. Have you found wisdom in unexpected places? Comment below with your story of humbling revelation, Blake Matthews thought, preparing to welcome the day's first shooters. His journey from arrogance to understanding had become a testament to the power of respect earned rather than demanded, and his badge now reminded him daily of the lesson that had changed not just his career, but his life.